Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic? Let's do it. What's your best spooky, scary story? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I came home from work one day to grab my spare tires. My sister was away at school 7 hours away, and neither of my parents are going to be home for another 5 hours at minimum. I ran in, changed my clothes, grabbed my tires, then drove to a garage to get them installed. I got home 2 hours later, and as I walked into the living room, there was a chair just sitting in the middle of the hallway and was facing the front door. I thought nothing of it, but didn't recognize the chair as being one that we owned. It was a standard metal folding chair that you would buy for a couple bucks at a retail store. I folded it up and propped it up against my dad's workbench in our garage. My mom gets home a couple hours later, and I ask her in passing why she left a metal chair in the middle of the hallway. She tells me we don't own any metal chairs, and that she hadn't been home up until an hour ago. I told her I came home, and there was a metal chair just sitting in the middle of the hallway after I'd gotten back from the garage. She told me to show her the chair, and I went out to the garage to show it to her. It was gone. I looked high and low for that metal chair, but couldn't find it. I swore to her that I wasn't on drugs, and that I wasn't imagining things. She thought what I was telling her was strange, but didn't pay much attention to it. I never saw that chair again, nor do I know where it came from or where it went. It's more bittersweet spooky than spooky, but here goes. My ex had this lamp that she had on the island in our kitchen. She turned it on pretty much every night, and in the mornings to make coffee. It was a pretty solid little lamp. I brought my cat to live with us late in our relationship because she had a dog, and my cat was pretty up there in age and not used to dogs. So I tried to spare her little heart from that shock. She came to love laying down in the spot by where the lamp plugged into an outlet on the wall of the island. She died soon after I brought her over, and I was absolutely heartbroken. I had a hard time accepting the loss. About a week after my cat died, my ex was grinding coffee in a little electric grinder, and I heard her shriek from the other room. I rushed over to see what was going on, and she told me she felt something cold pass by her feet. Then the light on the lamp started flickering. She tried to show me again the flickering, but it didn't happen. I just chalked it up to her being weird at 6 a.m. A couple of days later, she asked me to make coffee for her. I grabbed the grinder, flick on the lamp to see what I was doing, and sure enough, the same thing happened to me. A cold wind whipped past me like what I was doing, and the cat running around my feet. Then the light on the lamp flickered before I could even get the grinder going. It happened before or after, despite the hundreds of times I'd used that grinder in the same outlet as the lamp. I like to think it was my little girl saying goodbye one last time. It's been years, and we still wonder about it occasionally. There's no explanation other than some weird supernatural connection or just really big effing coincidence. For about 10 years now, my Nana has been living in a nursing home. She had a stroke, and mentally she's not all there. She still recognizes us when we visit and gets happy to see us, but she often talks gibberish, thinking she's in a distant memory in the past. It makes me sad because she and I always had a very close connection growing up. My parents both worked a lot, and she would stay with me. She used to know when I was lying. She could always sense when I was sick, even when she wasn't over. And she and I are eerily similar both in personality and looks. There are pictures of her when she was 21, and it could be me in the picture. We were very close growing up, and I love her dearly. I introduced her to my now husband when we started dating in college. He's from a different country than I am, and I live in his country. So we'd been dating a few years when my visa was going to expire. In order to live in one place, we decided to get married. However, we were still young, fresh out of university, and decided to just elope. We decided to get officially married at a courthouse while announcing our engagement, and then having a wedding a few years later. Official documents and wedding ceremonies are separated in my husband's country anyways. No one knew of our plan. We were, and are still, stupidly in love and thrilled to have such a crazy secret between us two. In hindsight, it was stupid, and no one would have judged us, especially considering we are still happily together years later, but we still decided to hide it because we were stupid kids. So we flew to visit my parents in my home country and announce our engagement, and my dad picked us up from the airport. We were chatting in the car when he told us that my Nana was freaking out while he visited her the other day. The day we decided to elope. Why was she freaking out? She announced to my whole family that she saw in her dreams that I had eloped and was now married. They dismissed her because they didn't expect that at all. She kept insisting and was incredibly lucid about it. She raised her voice, which she hadn't done before the stroke. My dad had mentioned because he thought it was sweet that she was so worried about this and became so lucid. My husband and I just got silent in the car and I went cold. We don't know how she knew that or if it was just a coincidence, but she knew somehow. We went to visit her a few days later and she didn't remember it at all. She was thrilled we were engaged. We're happily married now and had our wedding and stuff, and no one ever found out we had eloped before the wedding day, except my Nana, apparently. I tell this story a lot, and no one ever believes me, but I know what I saw. I was staying at my grandparents' for the summer when I was 14. It was 11 p.m. and I was thirsty. I went out to the kitchen and saw who I thought was my granddad sitting at the table eating a sandwich. I say hello, grab a glass of water, and head back to my room. My grandfather comes out of his room and asks who I was talking to. I turned around and no one was there. It freaked me out, still does to this day. Okay, so this was probably 15-ish years ago now. When I was in high school, my group of friends used to spend a lot of time at a particular friend's house because it was huge. It was also quite an old house, but his parents were cool with us basically taking over when we were there. We'd make dinner for about 10 people, stay up late listening to music and play video games. They never minded. Anyway, one evening we're sitting in his room watching TV. It's dark and the lights are on, but the curtains are open. Suddenly, two different people on opposite sides of the room jump like they've never been startled and look around. Both of them explain they saw in the reflection in the window on the second floor, just FYI, somebody walk across the room. None of us had moved. It freaked a few of the girls out, and we had to calm them down a bit. Flash forward to a couple of weeks later, and we found a pack of cards in our friend's house that had letters on them. Somebody suggested we could use them as a Ouija board and figure out if it's our friend's house was actually haunted. We got a big wooden board, I think it might have been the top of a table once upon a time, arranged the cards in a circle around the edge with an extra 2 homemade yes/no cards, got a glass, and off we went. It started to answer questions, telling us it was a man who used to live in the house and who died there. We asked when he died, and he just got the answer long. We asked if he was moving the glass, and he said yes. This is where I decided to be dumb, and I asked if he could move anything else other than the glass. Yes. We all paused and listened for the sound of something moving, but nothing happened. We asked if he had moved something. Yes. Nothing happened again. So we moved on and asked some more questions. This was at 10:30 p.m. After a while longer, we said goodbye. I think at least one of us was aware enough about Ouija board lore to know we had to close the conversation properly. And then a little later we all went home, a little spooked but enjoying it nevertheless. I walked home with another friend who lived nearby. As I walked in my front door, my mom called me through to be careful in my room because a mirror had fallen off the wall earlier, and they weren't sure if they picked up all the bits of glass. When I asked when this had happened, she told me, about 10:30, the same time I asked the spirit to move something. I did not sleep well that night. About 2 months after my father passed, my mom and all my brothers and sisters were sitting around the dining room table. We were just talking about the past and sharing stories. We were talking about my father, and suddenly the globe around the light of the ceiling fell straight down on the center of the table. It didn't break, roll, or move at all. Hitting the table scared the shit out of all of us. About 5 years and 2 boyfriends ago, I moved into an old farmhouse with my then significant other. He was a hoarder and was embarrassed about the state his house was in after his wife left him. He had an RV and that's where he slept because there was just shit, garbage, clothes, boxes, up to your knees in every room of the house. Me being extremely distressed by clutter cleaned the house, down to the cobwebby corners of the ceiling. Took me weeks, but I Murphy's oiled every inch of wood and filled his truck with over 10 loads of garbage. The very first night I was there, things were weird. At that point, I'd only cleared part of the living room. The boyfriend snored unbearably loud, so I opted to sleep inside on the couch while he slept out in his camper. I had just had a fight with my mother and was lying awake around 4 a.m. fuming about it. I heard my boyfriend come in the back door, muttering to himself as usual. He was opening and closing drawers and cabinets in the kitchen and figured he was searching for something. Finally, I got up because, hell, I was already awake. Maybe I could help him find whatever it was. The kitchen was 5 feet from where I was, and when I walked in, there was no one there. I looked around and called for him, but he wasn't there. I don't get scared easily, and at this point I was just curious about what he was. I went out to the camper and could hear him snoring hard before I even got to the door. I shook him awake and asked him gently what he needed in the house. He said he hadn't left the camper all night. I thought he was sleepwalking. When I went back inside, though, I noticed it had snowed lightly in the night, and the only tracks leading up to the camper were mine. A couple of days later, I moved my 2 cats in. They're super on edge, a lot of growling, acting out of character, especially in the middle of the night. I completely dismissed it, that it was a new, unfamiliar place. Obviously, they were uncomfortable. I'd finally gotten the bedroom habitable, and they would not cross the threshold into it. The first night we slept in the bedroom was when I started to fear the house. The bed was up against a window that faced out to the cornfield, and my guy insisted on sleeping on the outside of the bed, leaving me pressed against the window. I got this horrible feeling. Something was right outside the window, and I was frantic to the point of tears. I kept telling him there was something out there, and he said I was being dramatic, which was stupid because I'm just not. You spend your whole life being logical and calm, and when something weird happens, no one believes you. I slept on the couch. The next day, I noticed a handprint on the top of the bedroom window that I had just cleaned the day prior. I held my hand up to it, and it was 3 times the size of my own hand, bigger than any person's handprint I've ever seen. It wasn't just a print, though. It was elongated, as if the hand had dragged down the window. Still, could be an explanation, even though I had cleaned that window the day before and would have noticed, except the print was over 9 feet off the ground, directly over an open coal cellar. I showed my boyfriend, and he told me something surprising. His ex-wife thought there was something wrong with the house, too. She was making dinner one day and had gotten home from work. Her back was turned to him, and they had a full conversation. Then she looked out the window and saw him pull up in his truck. He still blew it off with me, just telling me I was paranoid and such. All this time, I assumed he was right, dismissed my instincts, and went about my things normally. Then one morning in the spring, I got up to use the bathroom. It was 4:46 in the morning, and I knew the time because I checked my phone when I got up. The whole bedroom was light from the sunrise, and I quietly climbed back into bed. The house is all wood paneling, and because of my arachnophobia, I had the bed scooted about 5 inches away from the wall where our heads were. I laid down and tucked my arm up under the pillow with my hand over the edge. The second I closed my eyes, an icy cold hand grabbed me by the wrist and yanked down hard. I bolted up and in a state of complete terror, shook my boyfriend awake and asked if he was effing with me. He wasn't. I will never forget that grip because I had to struggle to get my hand back. I called my close friend and she said, "You know that there's a cemetery within view of your bedroom, right?" I had forgotten, but being a practical person, it had never occurred to me that there might be a connection. She said, "Let's try something." Came over with a sagebrush and we smudged the house. We were both laughing at ourselves as we did it, but the thing is, nothing weird happened after that. Well, except for me falling into a hole in the floor, but I blame that on my own clumsiness. The relationship withered and I moved out, but we remained friends. He said nothing strange has happened since I left. Well, I mean, I'm sure he was a nice guy, but what's the dating pool like in your hometown that you ended up with a hoarder with a house full of garbage, and you're someone who's very neat and organized? Well, that's years ago, so glad you moved on. I currently live in a haunted house. I've heard voices, footsteps, and lights have been turned on and off. Or the ghost has a thing for silverware. I hear it clattering in the drawer all the time, and sometimes a knife or two will end up in the wrong slot in the drawer. But the strangest or scariest experience I had was the first night I spent in the house. I wasn't finished moving in. There were boxes everywhere. I didn't even have my mattress up there yet. I was bedding on an old futon mattress, watching a video on my phone, when I got the pins and needles feeling in my feet falling asleep. Except it wasn't on my feet. It was on the top of my head in the shape of a hand. I said, "Good night," turned off my light, and tried to sleep. When I woke up, my closet door was ajar. But other than that, everything was otherwise untouched. I guess whoever my unseen roommate is just wanted to check out who I was on my first night. My high school used to be a giant mansion before it was converted into an orphanage and then a high school. One section of the school, the third floor, was inaccessible. The staircase that led to the floor was blocked off with wood and painted black to match the chorus room where it was located. In 2003, during the fall school show of Les Mis, they had to remove the wood so they could replace the windows on that third floor. We even ended up some of the removed windows for our barricade. We had to play practice most nights, and if you lived far enough away, usually you would just stay at the school and wait, rather than go home just to come right back. While waiting for practice to start one night, myself and 3 friends, Ryan, Mike, and Michelle, decided to go up the staircase to check out the third floor. The staircase was rotted and falling apart from years of disuse, so we carefully went up one at a time to find an unremarkable hallway with some even less remarkable rooms off to the sides. All of this led into a big open area with an old stacked desks and folders full of test papers from like the 80s or something. The 4 of us were a bit disappointed, because the rumor was that this section of the school was not converted from the orphanage that occupied the space several decades earlier, and the ghosts of the orphans still haunted the place. Since we didn't get spooked, we ended up just digging through the old papers. While Michelle was looking through the papers in a side room with her back to us, Ryan pushed Mike and myself out of the room quietly and into an adjacent room to scare Michelle into thinking we were disappeared. Sure enough, she comes bolting out of the room, screaming at us, throwing out, "You guys," and this isn't funny. We had to muffle our mouths to keep from laughing when all of a sudden, one of the people in the room effing ruined the whole thing by giggling like a little girl. I turned to Ryan and Mike to see which one of them ruined the joke, but both of their hands were over their mouths and their eyes were wide as dinner plates. The room we were in, hiding behind the door, was small, maybe the size of a small one-stall bathroom. Maybe that's what it was once upon a time. And somebody in this goddamn tiny room was giggling, and it was none of us. The whole plot played out in probably like 10 seconds between leaving Michelle and hearing the giggle. So we stood there staring at each other, waiting for something to happen that explained this. It was like 4 or 5 p.m., and we were the only ones in the chorus classroom the entire day. We would have seen someone go upstairs. We would have heard the stairs creaking as they went up there. Whoever giggled at us from the inside that room was up there already. Unfortunately, we didn't get the explanation we needed because a second set of giggles started happening, this time more than one person making them. That was it for Ryan, a big tough former athlete turned show kid who screamed the highest pitched scream I've ever seen a guy that size make. It would have been funny if we weren't terrified. He pushed past us, ran screaming out into the hallway, scared the daylights out of Michelle on his way down, and we bolted down the steps. This time we did not take them one by one, and actual chunks of rotted wood started falling off. We explained what happened to Michelle, and then went somewhere that was not the chorus classroom until play practice started. The maintenance team must have known we were up, because we all collectively got talking about going up there. Safety concerns with the rotted steps, so of course people started going up there willy-nilly, hoping to see a ghost. There were more stories about that third floor during that year than promptly stopped once they replaced the windows and sealed the room back up. Now the school is closed and empty, so whatever ghosts were having a good time are now free to do so without the living getting in the way.